you, Carol, if you want to talk about, I'm going to turn off my thing. By the way, just so you know, myself, weirdly, like myself and Angus, who are running this, we're in Ireland, and the whole town is power cutted, and so is Angus. So we've literally no electricity, which is really bizarre. We
You
don't
look
live
like
in a
you're in
mountain.
some kind of weird, like, death metal band.
Well, it's quite clearly activists trying to close me down, or somebody else.
Oh,
I can think of one or two, but
they've cut
anyway, the
the
show
power.
will go on, and we'll let Carol go on. But yeah, sorry about my freakish kind of nature. I might kind of turn off my video. Work away, Carol.
So still, I was under the impression we were going to have a conversation about this. So I didn't know I was going to be
You're
on
right.
alone.
You're right. I just got rattled by my complete weird.
I kind of wanted your spooky little face to stay here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll stay here. I'll stay here. Well, I
Are
wanted
other
to talk.
people allowed to like jump in and ask Carol questions if one comes up, or are we not doing that right now?
Absolutely, they are. And I'd actually right now, because I'm so jittered about this power cut and trying to get some light onto myself, I'd appreciate if you'd start with a question, Sinead, to Carol while I
Grand.
organise myself here.
Hi, Carol. Sorry, turn my camera on.
There you go. Thank you.
I mean, I'll ask a basic question and then let you do your thing, because like you've been in this longer than I have. You know your stuff. You were actually one of the very first people who I turned to, as you know, when I was in a dark place. So thank you. So I suppose because one of the reasons why I've realized that I'm a filthy bisexual now, but I was under the impression that I was a lesbian during my trans-identified days. And it really was, it was one of the pieces of ammunition that I used. My same-sex attraction was one of the pieces of ammunition that I used to, quote, prove that I should have been a man. Where I kind of thought, oh, I'm attracted to women. Men are the ones that are attracted to women. Ergo, I should be a man. So I suppose my very basic question to you would be, was that your experience? Or if not, how did your being same-sex attracted play into your eventual trans identity?
I'll start off by saying that for me, it wasn't the biggest part of why I transitioned, other than me being butch was more of a factor. So if I had been a feminine presenting lesbian, I think I would have had a little less issue or desire to transition, because a lot of my desire to transition came from the way I looked and the way I had to move through the world, and the kind of ridicule, disdain, and just social issues I had. It's like death by 1,000 little cuts. It's hard to walk through the world being someone who is looked at as disgusting or gross, or not doing something so wrong as to pretending to be a man when you're a woman. But for what I've heard from younger lesbians, like, that are growing up right now, the teens in the early 20s, is their same-sex attraction is a huge component to them coming to a trans identity. And it's really the lack of like visibility of lesbians, and especially butch lesbians. And so many of them never seen a woman who looks and acts masculine, exist as a woman, and say she's a woman, exist in the world comfortably. I mean, I really didn't either. I mean, I really could have helped me as well, but especially a thing with the young ones. But for me, it was more my presentation as butch, and I was a tomboy as well. So I started getting shit for not acting like a woman, or not acting like a girl, not acting feminine, from the time I can remember, like 4. I fought wearing dresses. I wanted to play with the boys' toys. I did like some of the girls' toys too. Like I went through a whole doll phase where, the whole like, it's my baby thing, but in general, I really gravitated towards all the boy stuff. And I had these horrible fights with my mom over clothes, because, my mother's a very homophobic person, very religious too. And I wanted to wear boys' clothes. That's what I was comfortable with. As soon as I could express what I wanted boys' clothes. Nope, couldn't do that. I wanted to even have my hair in boys' cut style. Couldn't do that. My mother was also one of the first ones to, inform me that I wasn't acting like a girl either, that I didn't walk like a girl. That was always so very confusing to me as a kid. I don't know how girls walk, and I don't know exactly if there's a different way women are supposed to walk than men, but evidently I walked like a man. And I'd also get shit at school from my peers because I acted like a boy, according to them. And there's this really weird place that I think a lot of butch lesbians fall into, is that we can't really make connections with boys and men because we aren't one. We can't really make connections with a lot of the girls and women because we also aren't quite one, because especially heterosexual women are very, from my perspective, very preoccupied with being pretty to attract men. Well, that's nothing that butch lesbians or lesbians period are going to do. And in junior high, there was, seventh grade there was the definite turning point where my friend group went boy crazy, and I was left going, I'm confused. I'm just sitting here being the same as I always was, and they're off trying to wear makeup, really trying to wear makeup. I had one friend, I was just like, oh honey, please stop. But trying to wear makeup, and I'm just sitting there like, I want nothing to do with this. And I think unless lesbians find a home, unless lesbians find community, which lesbians I will speak of because that is my experience, unless we find a place, we really get lost. We really go adrift, and we need that community to ground us to something so that we don't always feel that ridicule that we are going to get fairly often. I know I totally answered your question.
Can I throw a couple of questions at you, and you can answer the ones you're comfortable with? Sure. The first one would be, and I agree with exactly what you just said there, the whole idea that, when you hit a particular age and you're not interested in the makeup and you're not interested in boys and so on and so forth, you are made to feel like you're not a real girl, which is strange because you literally are a girl. So it doesn't matter what you like or what you don't. So how strong was the pressure on you where obviously there may have been people in your life that were trying to, quote, fix you to make you more feminine, and then something horrible has happened where out the other side it came, where it was like, oh no, little girls who don't like, quote, girly things are actually boys. So that's the first one, which is ridiculous, but you be more authoritative to speak about that. The second one, and I think lots of people will be really interested in this, so I really hope that you're comfortable answering it. There's been a lot of conversation happening for a while now about how lesbians who do not want to sleep with an individual who may have a penis are actually bigoted and hateful and have to unlearn their problematic beliefs. How does it feel to be, a lesbian woman at this stage in life? I know you're not a daft teenager anymore, you're a fully grown-ass woman. So how does it feel to get to this stage in life and be told that your same-sex attraction, after all of the fight that was put into earning gay people's rights, how does it feel to be told you're actually just a disgusting bigot, Carol?
I have to say, it's one of the most disturbing things to happen out of this whole thing. I can't believe I am 41 years old and I'm sitting here having to answer this question, because when I came out in the late 90s and early 2000s, if I had gone to, say, I went to San Francisco's Gay Pride Parade, one of the biggest in the world, in 2001. If I had gone to that parade in 2001 and held up a sign that said lesbians don't like dick, people would have looked at me like, what are you even on about? Of course they don't like dick. Like, that sign is just stupid and redundant. I couldn't do that now. I can guarantee you I would get a lot of backlash for that. So it blows my mind. I also don't understand why people think that changing some outward appearance medically and clothes wise has anything to do with really who you want to have sex with. And I also wonder how these people are having sex that they're not coming in contact with genitals. Very confused by that concept, because you know, that's a big part of your sexuality and sex, right? I think sex at its core is very animalistic, should be if it's good. And you know, that involves bodies. You can't, you know, one of the grossest things I've heard is that when guys go on estrogen, the texture of their penis changes. So the mouthfeel is similar to a clitoris and vulva. It's the most disgusting goddamn thing I've ever heard. No, I'm sorry. An estrogen riddled flaccid dick is not a pussy, and you're not gonna get me to ever go there. You know, it's like, it's
The other
offensive,
part of it as
homophobic.
well is, you know, I know, I assume you've been subject to it. I've seen a lot of lesbians on Twitter being subject to it, where it's the idea that as long as it's a woman, it's fine if they have a penis because it's no different from a dildo. How do you feel about that?
I mean, lesbians have been getting this fucking question forever. Like, yeah. I remember back in the day, straight men used to fucking say this shit to me and to us. Well, you know, if you use a dildo, it's the same thing. Really? So a guy, like, let's just turn that around. You know, you can, what if a guy puts on a dress and you can do him in the butt, right? Same thing, right? Just, you know, let's just switch that. Or will a heterosexual woman be completely satisfied with a woman wearing a strap-on? I don't think so. I think that that's going to be is a woman wearing a strap-on.
I mean, like, Carol, you mentioned that you're at the young age of 41. It must be so strange to you that, I mean, you must remember, you know, in the 90s and the early 2000s when it seemed that actually gay people were now being accepted and we had all these strides made and gay marriage was made legal and things like that. I mean, how does it feel to be sitting here in 2022 and gay men and lesbian women not only are at a higher likelihood to go through transition because of all the bullshit that's thrown their way, but also the sexual shaming? And then even if you have the audacity to say that you are a same-sex attracted woman, that in itself is transphobic because people apparently are not same-sex attracted, they're same, quote, gender attracted.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, it's when I detransitioned, a big part, I think one of the most devastating things was that I really wanted to find the gay community again, and especially lesbians. I wanted to find lesbian community, and there was nothing there. It was gone. I couldn't find any groups. I couldn't find anything in my area, and I don't live in a huge city. It's all queer. It's all queer, and it's all trans. I mean, and all the trans rights advocates, all the people who are trans and identify as trans are running all the groups now, running all the organizations locally. So I couldn't go in there and say anything anyways if I wanted to, which is a big part of why I joined LGBT Alliance US and why I, you know, do a lot of work there now, because I feel like my transition was because of a lack of community and support. And a place to be. And my detransition was also like, oh wow, the community's gone. What's happening here? And that's why I do a lot of work there now. But it's depressing.
If there are any young butch lesbians listening in now who maybe their interest was piqued because they thought they were butch lesbians, but now they're considering considering transition, what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't speak to just the young ones. I would speak to all of us, because I was 34 when I did this. Mm-hmm. And I was following very closely on YouTube a 32-year-old that was going through it at the same time I was. And I followed a 40-year-old that was going through it at the same time I was. And if I go back and I try to find any of the old, some of the old documentaries about, you know, being a proud butch woman, guess what? Half of them have transitioned now. They'd be my age or older. It's something I really want to get across here, and most people don't understand. And I'm not even sure how many of us are out there, but my perception here is a lot of butch lesbians, a lot have transitioned of all ages. There was one on TikTok the other day I ran across. 50 years old starting testosterone. When I was in my trans support group, there was a like a 50-some-year-old butch lesbian starting transition. This ideology is insidious to butch lesbians. It gets in there, and it basically tells us, it pushes everything that we have been told and what we have probably told ourselves in the back of our heads for our whole lives, that we're wrong. What's wrong with us? Does seem innate. Our butchness does seem innate. Our masculinity seems innate. Where's that coming from? Why am I wrong? What's going on? Oh, bingo. Makes sense. I can be happy now.
How would you feel if I told you that if you go to the NHS website, which is the National Health Service here in the UK, and you look to the symptoms of gender dysphoria in young girls, they include things like not liking dolls, not liking pink, so on and so forth. How does it, I mean, I know how it feels, but I want you to say it. To be a butch woman and see on the NHS, for Jesus, saying things like that. I mean, medicalizing butch lesbians for being butch.
It's in the DSM, right? It's been there for a while.
Yeah.
These criterias are sexist and homophobic at their core, and they always have been. This is nothing new. There wasn't a magical past when homosexuals weren't being transitioned. We've always been transitioned. When I hear some people, I've heard some people say that the true transsexual is, the man who was very effeminate as a young boy, who's same-sex attracted, blah, 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 blah. Oh, who is that? That's a gay man. That's a homosexual man. No, and so, some of the first women to transition were butch lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, that's the thing. Like,
yeah.
You've seen there was many women back in the day who disguised themselves as male to fight in the war, because women weren't allowed to fight. And there was one that was a beautiful story where she dressed up as a man to go and fight in the war to find her husband. And there's this beautiful moment where the commanding officer calls out their name and they both step forward, and it's like, like, that's cute. She's been transed. People are calling her a trans man. Right. So all the butch women, or even she might have been the most feminine woman in the world. She disguised herself as a woman to go to war because women weren't allowed. We're literally transing so many just gender non-conforming people. Isn't this regression rather than progression?
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely is regression. And it's our whole society just doesn't seem to really have room for difference. Because if you really had room for difference, you could say that a woman could, act like a man, dress like a man, marry a woman and still be a woman. That wouldn't be the criteria for saying they're not their sex. I mean, when I was detransitioning, one of the most profound things that I came across was a radical feminist basically saying nothing makes you a woman other than being born female. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's so simple. It shouldn't be a radical concept, but for me, who had been drinking ginger juice since the early 2000s, it was like, oh, wow, I hadn't really thought of that. I hadn't really gone there.
Well, you know how there are some people in the medical field, the mental health field, the trans care field and stuff like that listening in now, if they're still here. You've got a very good opportunity as a butch woman, as a butch lesbian, who are very often silenced, to speak very bluntly right now. What would you say to them?
I would say that the number one thing that doesn't seem to be understood by the mental health professionals is that the vast majority of homosexuals were gender nonconforming children. That's not being taken into consideration. The vast majority of us butch women were gender nonconforming girls. And I don't mean just like we were tomboys and liked, boys' clothes. I mean, many of us said we were boys. Many of us thought we were boys. Many of us stood up, stood to pee. Many, like all these things that are like super trans now, it was just a normal part of us growing up and being outliers. And eventually, and yeah, puberty is brutal. It's brutal for everybody. And it can be especially brutal for butch lesbians because, you really are left out of so many things. You can't make these connections with maybe the girls that you grew up with, because now they've gone in a different route, and you can't make connections with boys because puberty, you're not a boy, and the boys are expecting something out of you that you're not going to give them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can really see how the trans ideology is a perfect thing for young butch women to buy into, for all of us to buy into. Obviously, we're buying into it, and lesbians especially are buying into so much of this internalized homophobia and misogyny. Especially, I know so many, just in my just like 2 or 3 degrees of separation between me and friends and others in the community, that even the ones that maybe don't go the whole way and identify as like trans men and take testosterone and have all the surgeries or whatever, there is so many lesbians that have had mastectomies. That's
Yeah.
it's almost like it's a fashion thing to do now, but not. It's coming from a misogynistic, homophobic place, but it is all the rage in the lesbian community to cut your boobs off. It's all the rage to take just a little bit of testosterone. It's all the rage to be non-binary.
And if they don't cut their boobs off, it's all the rage to wear binders, which I found really strange because I didn't know about that. I remember going to a couple of gay clubs in Glasgow, and there's people kicking about in binders, and you think they're like trans men that haven't transitioned yet. They were lesbians. It's like,
binding's been around for a while for lesbians, though, for butch lesbians. Like, in the
not
early
in
2000s,
this sense, though, where it's a part of a transition.
No. Like, I had a friend who was butch, and she wore binder. I mean, that's binded as you could back then. Pretty common.
What would you say? Like, sorry, Stella, on you go.
Yeah, just one. No, I don't want. Jeez, I don't want to get in the middle of this. But just that binding thing, it's something I've always wanted to know. So you can see gay men, camp men, and they're dressing up and they're giving it all. Is that the equivalent, or is there a darker? And I want you. Oh, Sinead's good. She carried me so much during that.
I'll be back in 2 seconds. I promise.
That was so stressful, that power cut. And we never get power cuts in this country. It's the most moderate country in the world, but there you go. So it's like the powers that be. But this, the way men who are camp and who are very feminine, they might put on makeup and all that. Is that the equivalent with a binder, or is it a little bit darker? Is there? Yeah,
it's darker. It's butch lesbians wanting to hide our breasts, because our breasts indicate femaleness, very much so. And some of us can pass as male, and so it just makes it a little easier. Also, we just feel more comfortable that way. It's you don't have that, especially if you have larger breasts, you don't have that front and center to give you more shit.
You're right, because what let's say feminine men or gay camp men, they accentuate things, they don't hide things of them. They're not really talking, as far as I know.
I mean, there has been drag for many years in the lesbian community, where that's part of it too, but that's not the main reason it's done.
Wow. Is there a place how will we make a place for the butch lesbian? I often think, I just feel they've just not been given a place in society yet.
Well, you have to just broaden out acceptance of both sexes to do whatever the hell they want ultimately, or however they feel comfortable. And something that I want to make clear, and I argue a lot about this, and I hear this a lot from women, I think especially, is that this idea that men give us the hardest time. And I gotta say, that's not the case. Women give us the hardest time. And for me, that was a big part of, not a huge, but it was a factor in my transition, because I couldn't even be with women without being ostracized in some way. Using the bathrooms can be very challenging. Sometimes they will think you're a guy entering the bathroom, but more likely what happened to me is they recognize me as a lesbian entering the bathroom, and a lesbian is predatory, and a lesbian will try to assert herself onto women. And basically, butch women get cast into the male role by a lot of heterosexual women. So they view us as the same as men. We're going to act like men. We're going to behave like men. We're going to maybe assault them or pressure them into sexual activity.
Do you think that that stigma that was placed on you, I mean, how much of a role did that play in your desire to transition? Was it the biggest part? Was it one part? Was it an afterthought?
It was a factor. It was, I mean, it's a natural part of the Butch experience. So like, I guarantee pretty much all Butches have like gone through this experience at some point. For me, it wasn't a big factor. I think for me, the biggest factor was the homophobia I grew up with and the disgust I got from my family related to my homosexuality and me being Butch. That was a big factor. But the day-to-day was grueling too, you know, going into the being like misgendered all the time can be tough. It doesn't kill you, mind you, people, doesn't kill you. It's not violence, but it can be rough, especially because what would happen is, you know, you'd be in a line, and this always happens to me in the grocery store. The grocery store is my arch nemesis. You stand in line at the grocery store, you got a line of people behind you. The cashier or whatever says, "Hello, sir, how are you doing today?" And you open your mouth and they go, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And then everybody looks at you and you're like, "Hello, everybody, I'm standing here." Now everybody knows that I'm probably a dyke. Great. Now I'm going to have all, you know, I didn't like all the spotlight either, you know.
I heard
Something
yeah.
Stella said a while ago on Gender Wider Lens stuck with me. I think she really nailed it. When you're a Butch woman, you wear your lesbianism on your sleeve. Everybody knows you're gay. You can't hide that fact. You have to walk through life everywhere you go with people knowing you're gay. That's hard.
Isn't that the most interesting thing, though, that we're constantly told about you should be proud of yourself. You should be proud to be gay. You should be proud to be lesbian. But the minute that a woman has the audacity to be a butch lesbian, it's like, what if you're trans, though? Like this new thing that's happened where you'll know a lot more about it than I do, but I've spoken to several actually young detransitioned and trans identified young women who are same-sex attracted, and it's so normal for them to say, I just got sick of people assuming that I was a dyke. I just got sick of people assuming that I was a boy, and I just felt that this was true. And it was like, how much pain would disappear from this realm if we just let butch lesbians be butch lesbians? You know, isn't that what we were fighting for? And now we're here where the Tavistock in the UK has got whistleblowers coming out and saying if things keep going the way they are, there will be no gay kids left in the future. What are we doing?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a real scandal for so many reasons, but it's definitely going to be a scandal as far as transitioning, well, sterilizing homosexuals. I feel like the thems that would be did actually manage to get at us eventually, and they used us to do it, and that's sick. And if you don't think that other homosexuals have played a role in this, you're a fool. We have. It's our community has a sickness, and I don't think we ever addressed it. That sickness is internalized homophobia. We hate ourselves. You know, it's well documented that lesbians have a much higher alcoholism rate. Gay men have tons of issues themselves where they engage in risky behavior and drug addiction. Meth is a huge issue in the gay male community. So we have a lot of fucking issues. So of course this came along, and of course this new religion took hold, and of course we're beat down in so many ways, so that when we're told to be nice, when we're told that we're being mean or horrible, we don't ever want to treat someone else like that, right? So it's almost like we've been, you know, we're being psychologically manipulated to be nice, even though it's against our own detriment, or it's for our own detriment. Like it's you know, it's hurting us.
Carol, you have to be nice, but everyone's allowed to be mean to you because you're an evil DeTrans woman. Remember the rules.
You know, you're talking about the lesbians being told, are you sure you're not really trans? I have a friend who she actually works with me at LGBA. We've become great friends, and we're close to the same age, both butch women. And she had a really close friend for like years, who transitioned, like about 10 years ago now. So she, she was older. She wasn't a kid. And when this butch friend of hers transitioned, the friend assumed she was going to transition too. Because if this friend was butch, which meant really she was a man and she was going to transition now, and she had such a close relationship with this other woman who was butch, obviously this woman also must be a man. So there's this pressure, even from in our own community to transition. And also when you see all the women around you transitioning, like, what are you going to do? Like, I started seeing it in the early 2000s when the first wave hit. I started seeing like all my butch lesbian friends suddenly identify as trans men. And I'm like, what's happening here?
Wow.
So there's not a lot of other opportunities. And then if you speak up and say, if I was to be in the regular LGBT community and I was to say, you know what, I don't agree with this, out you go, bigoted, boop, gone. There's no room for disagreement either. And that's so incredibly unhealthy.
What even is the modern LGBTQ plus whatever fucking alphabet salad community anymore? Anyway, if you can tell a gay man he must want to sleep with someone with a vagina, or you can tell a lesbian she must need to sleep with someone who has a penis, it's not the LGBT community anymore because it's homophobic. And something by its very definition that's homophobic cannot be for LGBT people.
But you have a lot of gays and lesbians doing this though, and pressuring other gays and lesbians to do this.
Why do you think that is? Why would a lesbian, for example, believe that she should either engage with a penis or encourage or even pressure other girls to do that?
Because she still believes that her same-sex attraction is wrong and dirty in some way. Just like she was told, just like she was brought up to believe. And I don't care if she had progressive parents, the rest of the world told her it was nasty or dirty, or she was a porn fetish to be indulged or something. Let's not leave out porn in this thing. You go Google lesbian, you're gonna get porn like that.
Yeah, but so
that's also
it's
difficult.
the most unlesbian thing that I've ever seen. You ever look at lesbian porn? It's clearly two straight chicks that don't want to be there, but the money's good. Like, it's just so silly. But now we've got like this up and coming right. Helena was talking about it earlier. No one really thinks about this, but I was a part of it. Helena was we all saw it. There was a massive, you're underestimating it if you weren't there, massive community of young women and teenage girls who became obsessed with gay porn and gay erotica and gay sex, like massive. And so we've known for a long time that there's heterosexual men who fetishize lesbians, not actual lesbians. They pay stereotypically feminine straight women to sleep with one another on camera. But then you've got this new thing that cropped up and started encouraging young autistic girls and girls with other issues to convince themselves that it meant they were men, which was young women and teenage girls consuming massive amounts of gay erotica. Like,
it's actually not strictly a heterosexual woman thing.
True.
Lesbians will, if we're going to watch porn, we usually watch gay male porn. And this going back, like this was actually in the first L Word. This was actually like one of their two of their episodes where the two lesbians are in bed and they're going to put on some porn, and it's gay male porn. That's all they watch.
Why?
And when I was in my early 20s, I went to hang over at a friend's house. She was a lesbian with her partner, and her partner was watching gay male porn.
I don't understand that.
Why would it be that? Why would it be that?
Why?
Yeah.
Because it allows you to have an outlet for porn and your sexuality without being degraded and humiliated like women are in porn.
That makes sense. Never mind.
Women are degraded in porn. It like makes me sick to my stomach. Right. A lot of the porn that I've seen throughout my life, it's like, I mean, the first porn I ever watched was like VHS kind of stuff, where it was like super vanilla, super just like two straight people having really normal sex. Not that big a deal. I wasn't scarred from it. I was just like, okay, whatever. However, That's the super vanilla basic stuff. But if you go out from
Wow.
there, especially nowadays on what you can find just free, just by Googling it, it's grotesque, very grotesque. And it really relies on the humiliation and subjugation of women. And as a lesbian and a butch lesbian, you don't want to fucking see that shit. You don't want to see women treated that way.
Wow. Okay, I better move it on. That was fascinating. Sinead, I'm forever in your debt for saving me there. And
I just like asking Carol questions because we've been speaking for a long time and she's got an answer for everything. So I was like, fuck it, I'll jump in.
Thank you.
Carol, you really should be a therapist. I think you'd be brilliant at it. And I know our industry has been ruined, and that's why we need people like yourself and maybe Sinead and maybe Helena to consider joining this broken industry that I seem to suddenly have become part of. You know, we really do. We really do.
I want
You know?
therapists to understand that gender dysphoria is actually a very normal part of being gay, and especially being a butch lesbian or a gender nonconforming homosexual. This is so very normal part of it. And some of us have a more difficult time than others, and we have to have help for it.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we've so much to learn.